April 8, 1942. Gray skies over the Pacific Ocean. On the deck of an American aircraft carrier sit 16 bombers that were never designed to take off from a ship. In just a few hours, they'll appear over Tokyo. For the first time in Japanese history, enemy aircraft will attack the Emperor's sacred homeland. This is the story of the most audacious operation of World War II. The story of how 80 Americans on an impossible mission changed the course of the Pacific War. This is the Doolittle Raid. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor is burning. In just 2 hours, Japanese bombers have turned America's main naval base into flaming ruins. 2,400 Americans are dead. The Pacific Fleet nearly destroyed. America is in shock. The Japanese Empire celebrates. Tokyo radio announces, "The Empire's islands are impregnable. The Americans will never reach them." But in Washington, President Roosevelt demands one thing from his military: retaliate, strike back at Japan. At any cost. It doesn't matter how, but it has to be done. The nation's morale is at rock bottom. America needs a victory, even if it's only symbolic. The problem is, it's impossible. The Japanese home islands are 5,000 miles from Hawaii. American bombers with that kind of range don't exist. Aircraft carriers can't get close. The Japanese Navy controls the entire Western Pacific. And then submarine Captain Francis Lowe has an insane idea. January 1942. Lowe sees B-25 Mitchell bombers at an airfield, twin-engine medium-range aircraft. And suddenly he realizes, what if we tried to launch them from an aircraft carrier? It's madness. A B-25 weighs 15 tons and needs at least 1,000 feet of runway. An aircraft carrier deck is only 500 feet. Theoretically, it's a death sentence. But the admirals grab onto this idea. Here's the plan. An aircraft carrier approaches Japan to within 400 miles. The bombers take off, bomb Tokyo, and continue west to China, to Allied airfields. 2,000 miles over open ocean and enemy territory. There's no way back. A B-25 can't land on a carrier. The odds of success are nearly zero. But it's the only way. To command the operation, they choose a legend. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle. He's 45 years old, a famous test pilot, the first person to complete a flight on instruments alone. A World War I veteran with a doctorate in aeronautics from MIT. If anyone can pull off the impossible, it's Doolittle. He selects 80 volunteers, 5 men per crew, 16 aircraft. They're not told the details, only that the mission is dangerous and they might not come back. Everyone agrees. Training begins in February, at a secret base. The pilots learn to take off with minimal distance, over and over, until it becomes instinct. They paint a line on the runway, 500 feet. If you're not airborne by that line, you're dead. April 2nd, 1942. The USS Hornet leaves San Francisco. 16 B-25s are strapped to her deck. It's a fantastic sight. The massive bombers completely cover the flight deck, their wings hanging over the water on both sides. Only at sea are the crews finally told their target, Tokyo. The first days of the voyage are calm. The ship heads west, toward Japan. On April 13th, the Hornet joins Admiral Halsey's task force with the carrier Enterprise fighter cover in case of attack. The bombers are loaded with ordnance. Each B-25 carries 4 500-pound demolition bombs and bundles of incendiaries. Everything non-essential is stripped from the aircraft, even the radios, to carry more fuel. In the tail section, instead of gun turrets, they install fake ones made of painted wooden poles, to keep Japanese fighters at a distance. The plan is simple. Approach Tokyo at night on April 18th to within 400 miles. Take off before dawn. Bomb during the day. And reach airfields in China by nightfall. The crews have maps, Chinese phrases printed on cloth, and hope that everything goes according to plan. But in war, nothing goes according to plan. Morning, April 18th. They're still 650 miles from the Japanese coast, farther than planned. But at 7:38 a.m., Radar picks up a Japanese picket boat. It spots the American task force and begins transmitting an alarm. A cruiser opens fire, sinks the boat, but it's too late. The message got out. The element of surprise is lost. The Japanese know American ships are nearby. Admiral Halsey makes a decision in seconds. Launch immediately. Yes, it's 250 miles farther to Tokyo than planned. Yes, they might not have enough fuel to reach China. But if they delay, Japanese bombers will find the carriers and destroy them. Signal flags go up on the deck. Army pilots, man your planes. It's 8:20 a.m. The sea is churning, 30-foot waves. The deck is pitching. The wind is in their faces. Good for takeoff. But the planes are packed so tightly that the distance to the edge of the deck is only 467 feet. It's not enough. But there's no choice. Doolittle insists on flying first. If the commander crashes, the others can return to base. His B-25 number 40-2344 taxis to the starting position. Engines roar at full throttle. The signal to launch. The aircraft lurches forward, gaining speed. Sailors cheering it on. A second before the edge of the deck, the wheels lift off. The B-25 drops, nearly touching the waves, but the engines pull, and the plane slowly gains altitude. A sigh of relief across the entire ship. One after another, the remaining 15 take off. The last, Lieutenant William Farrow's bomber, lifts off the deck at 9:20. The launch took only an hour. All 16 are airborne. The carriers turn around and speed back east at full power. Their job is done. The bombers set course west, toward Tokyo. The aircraft fly at wave-top level 50 feet above the water to avoid Japanese radar. Fuel burns faster than they'd like. After 3 hours, the Japanese coastline appears. Doolittle climbs to 1,500 feet and heads straight for Tokyo. It's around noon. And then, something incredible happens. No one stops them. Yes, the Japanese received warning about enemy ships, but no one could imagine bombers launching from such a distance. Air defenses aren't raised. Fighters remain on the ground. At 12:15, Tokyo residents hear the roar of engines. Unfamiliar, low-pitched, American. People run into the streets and look up. Some even wave, thinking they're Japanese planes returning from exercises. The first bombs fall on a military arsenal. Then, on oil storage tanks, a Mitsubishi factory, a power station, 500-pound demolition bombs, and clusters of incendiaries. Explosions, fires, panic in the streets. Doolittle drops his payload and heads west at low altitude. Behind him, the other B-25s, one after another. They attack not just Tokyo. Bombs fall on Yokohama, Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe. 16 aircraft, 16 targets. Japanese air defenses begin firing, but chaotically. Fighters scramble, but the Americans are already leaving. One B-25 takes hits from anti-aircraft fire but keeps flying. All 16 escape the kill zone. The operation over Japan takes 30 minutes. Now comes the terrifying part. 1,300 miles to China with nearly empty tanks. They fly hour after hour, fuel dwindles. Hope for a tailwind doesn't materialize. They calculated 10 hours to China. Reality says they won't make it. Evening falls, then night. Chinese territory should be ahead, but there are no airfield lights. No radio contact. The radios were removed to save weight. Weather deteriorates. Rain begins. Cloud cover drops nearly to the ground. One crew, Lieutenant Edward Yorks, realizes they definitely won't reach China. They turn north, toward the USSR. At 9 p.m., they land the B-25 in a field near Vladivostok. The plane is intact. The crew is safe. The Soviets intern them. The USSR isn't at war with Japan and can't let them go. But they'll survive. The remaining 15 push to the last drop of fuel. By midnight, tanks are empty. Total darkness. The ground is somewhere below, but where is unknown. Whether it's China or still Japan. Impossible to tell. Doolittle gives the last order over the radio. Abandon aircraft. Crews bail out into the night. Some try to land their planes blind in mountains and fields, anywhere. Of 16 B-25s, not one survives. All are destroyed or abandoned. Doolittle lands by parachute in a rice paddy in China's Zhejiang province. He thinks the mission has failed, that he'll face court-martial for losing all the aircraft. He doesn't know that in a few weeks he'll be a national hero. Of the 80 crew members, 69 survived and returned to Allied forces, helped by Chinese guerrillas and locals. 3 died in crash landings and bailouts. But 8 men fell into Japanese hands and occupied China. The captured airmen are tortured. A show trial is held in Shanghai. They're accused of murdering civilians, though the targets were military. All received death sentences. Later, under pressure from international organizations, 5 sentences are commuted to life imprisonment, but 3. Lieutenants Dean Hallmark, William Farrow, and Sergeant Harold Spatz are executed by firing squad on October 15, 1942, in Shanghai. They die as soldiers. Another, Lieutenant Robert Mader, dies from dysentery and starvation in a POW camp in 1943. The remaining 4 will spend the rest of the war in prison until 1945. Conditions are horrific, but they survive. And that's not all. The Japanese launch a retribution campaign against the Chinese population. The operation receives the code name Zhejiang Jiangxi Campaign. The Japanese army systematically destroys villages and towns in provinces where American airmen might have landed. Estimates vary, but historians agree on a figure of about 250,000 dead Chinese. Civilians killed in retaliation for helping the Americans. Entire villages burned. It's a terrible price for the operation. So, what did the Doolittle Raid accomplish? Material damage to Japan was minimal. About 50 buildings destroyed, 90 people killed, mostly civilians. Military infrastructure suffered insignificant damage. From a purely military standpoint, the operation was inefficient. 16 bombers lost. 11 men killed or executed. 250,000 Chinese killed. But war isn't just tanks and bombs. It's also psychology. For America, the raid was a breath of air after the Pearl Harbor disaster. Newspapers scream headlines, "Tokyo bombed." The country rejoices. Morale is reborn. Yes, Japan is strong, but not invulnerable. America can strike back. At a press conference, President Roosevelt tells journalists with an enigmatic smile that the planes took off from Shangri-La, the mythical land from the novel Lost Horizon. The operation's secrecy is maintained for months. The Japanese are baffled. Where did the bombers come from? Alaska? China? A secret island base? For Japan, it's a shock and catastrophe. Not military, but psychological. Emperor Hirohito was in the palace during the raid. Theoretically, he could have been killed. The empire's prestige is undermined. The people were promised the enemy would never reach the sacred islands. That promise is broken. And most importantly, Japanese command realizes the defensive perimeter isn't enough. Admiral Yamamoto, the brilliant strategist who planned Pearl Harbor, concludes that American aircraft carriers must be destroyed, or such raids will repeat. He insists on an operation against Midway Atoll, a remote island in the center of the Pacific. The plan: capture Midway, lure out the American fleet, and destroy it in a decisive battle. June 4th, 1942. Just a month and a half after the Doolittle Raid, the Battle of Midway begins. The Japanese fleet, the most powerful in the world, enters combat and loses. Catastrophically. 4 Japanese carriers are sunk in a single day. America goes on the offensive. The Pacific War changes course. Historians debate how much the Doolittle Raid influenced the decision to attack Midway. But the fact remains. After April 18th, Japanese command was rushing, nervous, and wanted a quick victory. And that led to Midway. James Doolittle returned to the United States, expecting court-martial. Instead, President Roosevelt personally awarded him the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. He was promoted 2 ranks at once, from lieutenant colonel to brigadier general. He continued fighting. He commanded the 12th Air Force in North Africa, then the 15th in Italy, then the 8th in Europe, the one that bombed Germany into surrender. After the war, he became vice president of Shell Oil and received dozens of awards. In 1985, President Reagan promoted him to full general, 4 stars. In 1988, the surviving raiders held their last reunion all together. By then, fewer than half remained. James Doolittle died September 27, 1993, at age 96. At his funeral in Arlington National Cemetery, 4 F-15 fighters flew over his grave in the Missing Man formation. Every year, on April 18th, the surviving raiders gathered for a reunion. They had a tradition, a bottle of 1896 cognac, Doolittle's birth year, with 80 silver goblets, 1 for each participant. When someone died, his goblet was turned upside down. The plan was that when only 2 remained, they would open the bottle and drink to all the others. But in November 2013, when only 4 raiders remained, all in their 90s, they decided not to wait. At the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Dick Cole, Doolittle's co-pilot, opened the bottle that had waited 57 years. "Gentlemen, I propose a toast to those we lost on the mission and those who have passed away since," he said. "Thank you very much, and may they rest in peace." They drank together. Cole, Edward Saylor, and David Thatcher, with Robert Height joining via video from home. Staff Sergeant David Thatcher died in 2016. Dick Cole, the last surviving raider, died on April 9, 2019, at age 103. All 80 goblets now stand upside down at the museum in Ohio. The Doolittle Raid didn't win the war. It didn't inflict serious military damage on Japan. But it did something that armies and navies couldn't. It restored faith. Faith that the impossible is possible. That a handful of brave men can change the course of history. That even when all seems lost, there are those ready to take off from the edge of an aircraft carrier deck into the unknown. Because it has to be done. On April 18, 1942, 16 bombers appeared over Tokyo, and the world changed forever.